It's time for you all to wake up and shift your paradigm. This world is the kingdom of darkness, and we are living in its last days. It won't be long before the day of the Lord will come like a thief in the night. The heavens shall pass away with a great noise, and the elements will melt with fervent heat, and the earth and everything therein shall be burnt up. The Luciferian elite have been setting up the New World Order, and now they've established the globalist beast system for the rise of that wicked one and revealing of the man of sin who comes after the workings of Satan. Don't take my word for it. Read the Bible, and you'll know that perilous times shall come in the last days. And we are in the last days.
Artificial intelligence it's connected to so many other things that are going on today, and because it's like we're seeing a convergence. So you've got, not only the amount of knowledge that's being developed and the amount of data and the computer systems, and into quantum computing, which is connected to AI, but you also have science being developed in all sorts of different areas, and we have all of this sort of converging and changing our lives, and it's all in pursuit of how do we create this demon thing. I think, and everybody who are very well versed in these very much high levels of quantum computing, artificial intelligence, interdimensional thinking, quantum physics, they are quite familiar with the understanding that this demon aspect is not just an allegory, because a lot of these people are initiated into the mysteries, and science is sort of that outward mask, like that theater mask or the crazy clown demon mask look, right? Because it's what's underneath is who they are and what they really believe. And I don't think most people understand that when we talk about AI, we need to talk about quantum mechanics, because people are thinking that quantum mechanics is going to do a certain amount of things to bring about the end time and to push into further science and things. And the sort of common thought is they need AI to partner with quantum mechanics and quantum computing, which they're starting to do, to complete it. And so they need to marry the two, which has a very interesting sort of connotation and understanding when you get to it. And if you think about where all of this sort of begins is because artificial intelligence goes deeper than just what we can see. It's going to get into the quantum sort of world. It's going to get into nanotechnology. It's going to get into the the whole aspect of quantum ideology. And if we understand that quantum mechanics has been working for, being put together for the last 100 years or so, and it's sort of like stepchild coming out of that, or sister is Sophia, or the artificial intelligence, then you won't be surprised to learn that Wolfgang Pauli, who is considered the sort of pioneer of quantum mechanics, he was deeply into the occult, which is what I was referring to. And this is not uncommon. He's an individual that was into alchemy and a fan of Carl Jung, and totally into Eastern religions, and totally believe that if you want to understand this whole concept of artificial intelligence and quantum mechanics and quantum computing as sort of descends out of it, you have to understand Eastern mysticism. And then as that sort of progresses, you get pioneers like Niels Bohr and Werner Heisenberg, and both of them consulted the Vedas for better understanding. And in fact, they thought that their experiments were completely consistent with teachings out of the Vedas. And what they would say is that there's a unity, and I'm going to read this. There's a unity and a continuity of the Vedanta that is reflected in the unity and the continuity of wave mechanics. So they're basically saying they're talking and are kind of one of the same thing. And Heisenberg, he thought that quantum theory makes sense to people who read the Vedanta and consider Vedic thought. And that's exactly what he's referring to when he talks about that. And then as they get into this understanding of waves and particles, that's where you start to get into this whole understanding of the quantum world. And the idea of quantum entanglement is an idea that comes from their idea of knowledge and the knowledge of the universe, that is held at the quantum level. And you've heard that term come out of CERN, but this is a little bit different. And that's why there's a lot of dispute as to what the God particle is and whether or not they're actually trying to get, what happened at the point of the Big Bang, of the start of the universe, as science would call it. But what they're searching for is something called the Atma, A-T-M-A, or A-T-H-M-A-N, A-T-M-A-N. And this is a invisible particle, and it doesn't merge with all of the other particles, but it sort of manipulates the particles and this is typical Veda thought. And so what it is that it is the soul and the consciousness and the communicator of the instructions and the information and the decisions to all the particles in the universe, and quantum entanglement that goes out instantly. And it works through the particles like it avatars the particle, which again is that Eastern Vedic sort of thought. And it is the true life force. And it is the undiscovered particle because they don't even know how to find it, but that's what they're kind of searching for as they get down to it. And it has different properties than other particles. And this is what is holding the knowledge of the universe and communicates it everywhere, which they'd love to be able to tap into. So if you want artificial intelligence that is going to go to a level beyond just being self-aware, it has to be able to tap into something that's limitless, right? Because it's going to be forever learning. So obviously, if you're going to want to expand quantum computing, you have to have it work in a manner that is more than just single task sort of purpose. Like it can do a ton of things, but single purpose, right? And it doesn't really do anything with that other than give you data and information. So when you hear about artificial intelligence being married up with CERN or with Google, there's not that many of these very, very advanced quantum computers in the world, but wherever they're doing it, they're trying to match AI in there so that it can expand its ability than single source sort of inquiries, right? So it wants to be able to go into different dimensions, do things faster than anything that's ever been done before, but in a way that can do something with that information coming out and develop it. So that's where they want it to partner with AI. But you also want AI in the interdimension aspect if you're going to develop more than a self-aware individual. And I don't think it's just knowledge that makes you self-aware, but certainly this ability to become self-aware with intelligence and to be able to create things in terms of mentally and produce things out of nowhere like humans can, or at least out of the imaginations, or at least how we think we can do that. Let's at least put it that way, because I know some people will believe that we don't have any original thoughts, we don't create anything, but that's fine. But if you want to raise that to a level of godhood, to a level of technology that they had before the flood, to a level that could bring you to the point of rebelling against the omnipotent God of everything, you need access to this information in a self-aware manner that can work in multiple dimensions. So whether or not you are channeling a spirit or this other type of creation will channel a spirit, in this case a demon, is it then really getting into the occult thought process of this knowledge of everything that's the Atman particle, or is it really just trying to find another way to communicate and be led and manipulated by demon spirits, right? And as we go back using the Greek understanding of it, this would go back to what they call hero worship. So after the hero, Titan, Nephilim, died, they would be afraid of this hero spirit and would come back to haunt its place of authority that it ruled from. And so the people used to do sacrifices and rituals to appease this god who had just lost his physical body, because his body died, but it's an immortal spirit that's not permitted to go to sleep, and it's not permitted to go to heaven, and it has enmity for humankind. So you can imagine how upset it is, and that's why people have to worship them in the Greek times. And we understand that as those strange kind of gods, not the goat gods, but the evil spirits, where some of the idols were made for in the Old Testament, and as the same as those devils or those evil spirits that Jesus was referring to in the New Testament that thirst for a body, right? Because they need a body to interact with this world. Otherwise, they're just kind of in nowhere land, and Jesus actually calls it as thirsting for a body. So they are desperate to have a body all of the time. I believe they've made some contact with these things, not only through rituals, but through possibly some other experiments that they have the ability to manipulate. Just like they might have the ability to manipulate an Ouija board, for example. Science stems out of the occult. So if you go back to the formation of modern science in about 1660 to 1662, some will date back even to the 1640s with the formation of the Royal Society. This is a group that is formed by the Rosicrucians and the Freemasons, right? And they're going to develop the 7 sacred sciences, which are the same sciences that were developed by Enoch, son of Cain, and his progeny of the Cain line, to a level that took the antediluvian world into the first apocalypse by water. And so science pays tribute to the Royal Society even to this day. And the Royal Society is still guiding everything. And what they're trying to do is develop the sciences to bring about the end time. They're trying to develop the technology to bring about the end time. They're trying to honor their pantheon of gods and dishonor the God of the Bible and not give God credit for anything, and to slander God, and so that they can bring about this rendezvous with destiny in the end time. So everything is absolutely linked between science and polytheism, and people get confused because, well, they say, well, the seculars believe in evolution. That's pablum for the masses. That's all that's designed to do, is temporarily lead people away from God and prepare them to accept the other ideas afterwards. They'll discard that very, very soon, I think, because, you know, the higher level of scientists and that what's behind and guiding science, then you understand that they actually called themselves, as they formed the Royal Society, as the last of the sorcerers and the first of the scientists. And that's that transition as they take on that new mask into modern time. So they are going to honor their pantheon with their inventions and their advancements and everything that they call, whether or not it's the Apollo rockets that's going to the moon. You can name an endless list of this iconology that's used in science. That's there for a reason. It's their belief system.
Alright, so I'm gonna do a bit of a show and tell video today. It's just have a few different things that some people sent me, and they all happen to kind of form a unified theme in a way, so I'm just going to kind of read them all together here, and you can do with it as you will. The first one somebody sent me was this is obviously from some Kabbalistic website, Living Wisdom. And the title of the article is called The Land is a Ball. Master Kabbalists and Their Writings. Prior to Christopher Columbus's famous voyage across the Atlantic, most people thought the world was flat, with a visible edge that one could fall off of into oblivion. Most people thought this, but not all. English Zohar Vayikra, Volume 14, verse 141. Rav Hamnuna Saba, the elder, explains further in his book that the entire inhabited land rolls around like a ball, so that some are up and some are down. To wit, the creatures around the globe are opposite each other, and the 7 sections of the globe are 7 lands, the 7 continents. All of the creatures, all of the 6 lands, are different in their appearance according to the difference in the atmosphere in each place, and they live like any other man. That's right, the Zohar, written over 2,000 years ago, is clearly stating that the world is a globe, and therefore round. It also happens to mention that there are 7 continents, of which 6 are inhabited. Let us continue. English Zohar Vayikra, Volume 14, verse 142. There is an inhabited place, so that when there is light on some, on that side of the globe, it is dark for others on the other side of that world. Thus, when it is day for one group, it is night for the other. There is an inhabited place where there is day only and no night, save only for a little while. Antarctica. Here the Zohar is demonstrating the grasp of the concept of the Earth spinning on an axis and revolving around the Sun. This was not widely accepted or understood until the 16th century, only some 1,500 years later. So this obviously is interesting because, I mean, if we had verses like these in the Bible, then obviously there would, would there even really be able to be any debate over, whether the Bible teaches that the Earth is a globe in space? I mean, this is pretty dang explicit. Nothing like this exists in the real scriptures, and yet in the Zohar is where you find it. Food for thought. Again, it always comes back to the Kabbalah. So, speaking of Kabbalah, another friend sent me this. This is a portion from a book on experiencing nature, the geometrical Kabbalahs of John Dee and Johannes Kepler, the Hebrew tradition, and the mathematical study of nature. So not only does the Kabbalah teach explicitly that there's a globe and that you can be standing on opposite sides of it and 7 continents and all that, just the idea of mathematical abstraction as well as connecting this to Neoplatonism. So this is an interesting excerpt. I'm just going to read these 2 pages here. The geometrical Kabbalahs of John Dee and Johannes Kepler, the Hebrew tradition and the mathematical study of nature, by Michael T. Walton and Phyllis Walton. Renaissance Neoplatonism was marked by a preoccupation with restoring ancient wisdom as a foundation for present and future knowledge. Although its adherents often had divergent and idiosyncratic agendas, there was a consistent emphasis on developing a Christian worldview grounded in knowledge of the harmony of God's creation, which itself is something that you have to ask, is that something that God even asks us to do? But never mind. The Renaissance Neoplatonic synthesis of Christianity and ancient philosophy was significantly reinforced by the discovery of the Kabbalah, the Jewish esoteric tradition. The Kabbalah taught a descending order of creation from the perfection of God to the imperfect material world. The letters of the Hebrew alphabet, which are also numbers, were the basic units of creation. The notions of creation by descent and numerical harmonies indicated similarities between the Kabbalah and the ideas of Pythagoras and of Plato. The correspondences were believed to demonstrate that both traditions shared a common origin, i.e. divine revelation to Adam, Abraham, or Moses. Renaissance Christians, like Pico di Mirandola, Johannes Reuchlin, and Franciscus Georgius, looked to the Jewish mystical tradition in their attempts to rediscover the wisdom behind the Hebrew scriptures. They also viewed the Kabbalah as a sacred original from which the pagan philosophers derived their knowledge. Numerous studies have established the importance of Neoplatonism and the Christian Neoplatonic Kabbalah to the intellectual life of the 16th century. The lasting effects of this worldview on European thought, however, are much less clearly understood. One area in which the Neoplatonic Kabbalistic philosophy can be shown to have shaped future thought is in helping to establish the idea that mathematical abstraction is descriptive of nature. How easily Neoplatonism could be connected to Hebrew Kabbalah is seen in the similarity between the ideas of the 6th century philosopher Boethius and the fundamental Kabbalistic text Sefer Yetzirah. Both were popular sources for 16th century Neoplatonism. Boethius taught that, quote, all things do appear to be formed by the reason of numbers, for this was the principal example or pattern in the mind of the Creator, unquote. This belief was supported by Sefer Yetzirah, or Book of Formation. Yetzirah declared that God created the world through 3 aspects of the verb to number. He created his word cosmos through 3 numberings by writing Sefer, number so far, and telling Sipper. For Renaissance Neoplatonists, the view that number underlies all creation was axiomatic. The success of 16th century mathematicians in showing correspondences between observable phenomena and mathematical abstractions, such as geometrical figures, was proof that number is the basis of the natural world. This served to establish mathematics as an indispensable tool for reading the, quote, book of nature, God's second great scripture. Mathematics thus became an integral part of natural philosophy, not only for Renaissance Neoplatonists, but also for succeeding generations. How the Neoplatonic Kabbalistic tradition helped to routinize mathematics into the study of nature is illustrated by an analysis of the sources for and the impact of the, quote, geometrical Kabbalahs of John Dee and Johannes Kepler. John Dee, English magus mathematician, focused the general elements of Neoplatonism into his area of special interest, the relationship of mathematics to nature. He was enormously well-read and wrote on a wide variety of topics. 2 of his works, however, the Modus Hieroglyphica and the, quote, mathematical preface, are crucial to understanding the role played by the Neoplatonic Kabbalistic philosophy in his mathematics. Anyways, fortunately that's all I have to read. It seems like you have to, I don't know why this book is so expensive. $139 for an ebook? Does that make any sense? I don't know. So, there's a little clip. I'll leave this link, but, John Dee and Kepler. I'm curious what else it had to say. Anyways, so finally, from The New Scientist, somebody also sent me this article, which is, The New Scientist is, now we're definitely talking about a publication that is more into the esoteric. So this one's called Why Two Geniuses Delved into the Occult by Amanda Gifter. In his latest book, Deciphering the Cosmic Number, historian of science Arthur Miller investigates the bizarre friendship between quantum physics pioneer Wolfgang Pauli and famed psychoanalyst Carl Jung. Together, the 2 great thinkers delved into mysticism, numerology, and alchemy in their quest to understand the universe and themselves. Miller tells New Scientist about his experience writing the book. What drew you to write about the relationship between Jung and Pauli? As a physicist, I was, of course, aware of Pauli's scientific achievements. Meanwhile, my interest in creative thinking had led me to Jung. Almost by accident in the 1980s, I spotted on a library shelf a book they co-authored, The Interpretation of Nature and the Psyche. This really intrigued me. What did the apparently austere Pauli have to do with Jung, who routinely delved into the occult and whose reputation sometimes suffered for it? Their book is actually made up of 2 essays. Jung's is on synchronicity, nothing unexpected there, but Pauli's was a real eye-opener. He wrote on Johannes Kepler and explored how his scientific achievements had to be understood within the times in which he lived. This involved looking into alchemy, mysticism, and religion. Amazingly, he included his own research into this area. This dazzled me. I had never imagined him to be an expert on such esoteric material and so passionate about it. I had to know more about both of them. What was their connection? Who was the real Wolfgang Pauli? What was the most interesting thing you discovered? I was amazed that each considered the other's work to be of equal importance. For Jung, quantum physics, and for Pauli, Jung's analytic psychology, with its emphasis on alchemical symbols, numbers, and myths, as well as Eastern religion and philosophy. The 2 sat for hours on end in Jung's Gothic-like mansion on the shores of Lake Zurich, dining on fine foods, drinking vintage wine, and smoking the finest cigars, while discussing topics from physics and whether there is a cosmic number at the root of the universe. Ties right into what we were just reading before, doesn't it? I mean, it goes back to Kabbalah, John Dee. To psychology, ESP, UFOs, Armageddon, Jesus, Yahweh, and Pauli's dreams. Theirs was a journey into the mind. As Jung put it, with Pauli he could enter, quote, the no-man's land between physics and the psychology of the unconscious, the most fascinating yet the darkest hunting ground of our times, unquote. Wow. Why were two such great scientists drawn to these occult ideas? Even as a boy, Jung found himself drawn to the occult. This would become the root of his break with Freud. Unlike Freud, Jung was interested in aspects of the unconscious that could not be attributed to an individual's personal development but derived from a deeper, non-personal realms common to humankind, the collective unconscious, whose contents he called, quote, archetypes. Jung came to realize that understanding the collective unconscious involved using images and symbols from alchemy and myth. So you guys understand, right, that when he talks about the collective unconscious, that's just a different name and a different conception of, he's talking about the spiritual realm. And when he says archetypes, those are the entities in that spiritual realm. But so from the quote-unquote psychology, he's putting a psychology spin on it so that it's all in your mind. The collective unconscious, so we each have our individual unconscious, but we're all tapped in together somehow. So he's just taking ancient occultism, ancient concepts, and then just like with science fiction and so many other things where you just kind of, you relabel everything. And oh, it's new and it's not new. It's just the same old thing with a different hat. And that's all Jung was doing. He had a spirit guide and everything. Okay. As a graduate student, Pauli became interested in the 17th century scientist and mystic Johannes Kepler. Reading Kepler convinced him that finding universal laws of nature required going beyond science as it is ordinarily defined. Pauli turned to Jung for help in response to a life-threatening crisis in 1932. Psychoanalysis with Jung led him to believe that alchemy and mysticism were the means to open up his mind, to increase his creativity and understand what drove him. Jung showed Pauli that the symbols from alchemy were the key to why he had experienced so much angst in discovering the exclusion principle in 1924, and why this angst had to do with his neurosis. Throughout the rest of his life, Pauli saw his research through the lens of Jung's analytic psychology, i.e., occult belief systems. This was the case in his work towards CPT symmetry, on parity violation, and his final crusade with Heisenberg towards a unified field theory of elementary particles. Wow, there we go again. Definitely gonna have to look more into this Pauli guy. Was there any merit in these ideas? I believe so, yes. Even though through such ideas they developed an avenue to begin to understand that elusive thing called consciousness. Each believed that their own subjects in isolation lacked the tools and ideas to do this. To Pauli, quantum physics was restricted to examining the attributes of atoms as explainable by mathematics. In this, atoms are treated as dead matter, but how do the atoms and molecules that make us up combine to give us the ability to contemplate love, hate, death, and the universe? To Jung, on the other hand, psychology lacked the concepts to deal with phenomena such as synchronism, that is, meaningful coincidences. Although the two men never came up with answers, the questions they raised, the level of their discussions, and their quest to fold physics and psychology together merit further consideration. That was one of the reasons I wrote this book. What did they each gain from their relationship? They gained confidence that their struggle towards an interdisciplinary explanation of the mind was worthwhile. Pauli became more than an au courant with Jung's psychology, myths, Eastern religions, and philosophy. Under Pauli's tutelage, Jung became somewhat conversant with basic ideas of quantum physics. Both were entranced by Niels Bohr's notion of complementarity, which asserts a reconciliation of opposites, such as wave and particle, in a framework not unlike that of yin and yang. Wow. By the way, yeah, Niels Bohr, he has a yin and yang on the wall of his, of the Niels Bohr Institute, that Order of the Elephant thing. Let's see if I can dig that up. Yeah, so he was a mystic too. Jung learned that a basic principle of alchemy, reconciliation of opposites into a unity, pervades quantum physics too. And they each gained a friend and profitable insight on a very different way of thinking about the universe. A very old way of thinking about the universe. So yeah, crazy how these three things kind of all tie in together, and man, just underscores all the same line of direction. So thanks to everyone who sent me stuff, and keep on sending your emails and sending me articles and links and all the fun stuff. I I can't get to them all, obviously, but I try and kind of pick the ones that pique my interest and hopefully will spark other people to continue to research all these things more, so that you can, the whole point is so that you can show people that when we say, look, this stuff did not actually come from a biblical worldview. I mean, when you look into the Renaissance, when you look into Neoplatonism, when you look into the effects of Hermeticism and Kabbalah and alchemy, there's just riddles, all this stuff, all the way from, I mean, Neoplatonism goes all the way back to Augustine, right? But it's just been kind of, I kind of look at Neoplatonism as that one kind of philosophical gateway drug that the church at large, or Christianity at large, was never able to really shake off. And eventually, because as that second thing I was reading was the Neoplaton, Plato, Neoplatonism, just Greek philosophy in general. I mean, it's when you really boil it down, it has way more in common with Kabbalah and mysticism and the occult than it does with the Bible. But of course, all these guys, all these scholars were just so enamored with the Greeks and Plato and all this stuff that they had to try, and they couldn't help themselves. They had to try and synthesize it. They had to try and usurp it for God. And then yet eventually, had this, a little bit of yeast works through the whole dough, and that's exactly what happened. And you see all these steps and these stages where all this idea of like, quantifying the universe, quantifying creation, and using that to, there's an underlying language. I mean, you hear people today like Jason Lyle, he's completely bought into this idea that math and numbers is the language of God, and it's permeated. So yeah, you treat the creation as this quote-unquote book of nature, even though the Bible doesn't ever talk about there being a second book. I mean, in some ways it's kind of like it's like a weird version of kind of like with what Mormonism attests to. Like there was a second revelation of the gospel, right? It wasn't enough just to have the Bible. There needed to be the Book of Mormon and Joseph Smith and all that. But we totally denounce that, but then we turn around and we affirm these ideas. The Book of Nature and natural philosophy, and it was just another Trojan horse, another gateway drug. I don't know, I'm running out of good analogies, but you hear what I'm saying. So anyways, thanks for sending me this stuff. Bye.
There's two possible causal explanations. One is, in broad terms, that everything that we see arose through undirected material processes, some form of undirected evolutionary change. Another idea that's been held all the way back to the ancient Greeks is that there was a mind that was shaping the material processes, that there was some kind of intelligent design. Now, if you hold to methodological naturalism, you're going to exclude the design hypothesis by definition. You're not even going to consider it, whatever the evidence is.
Right.
But it might be the case that we have encountered certain kinds of evidences in biological systems that would, in any other context, lead us to conclude design. For example, one of the things we've discovered at the Foundation of Life, which I've written about in a couple of different books, is the digital code stored in the DNA. We know that digital code, software, always comes from a programmer, and so we might be tempted to consider the possibility that the information stored in DNA in a digital form is actually evidence of a master programmer for life. It would be like walking into the British Museum, looking at the Rosetta Stone, and saying, well, where did all those interesting inscriptions come from? If we're holding to methodological naturalism, we're going to have to say, well, something like wind and erosion or some other materialistic process, even though we know from experience that information of the kind inscribed on the Rosetta Stone always comes from a mind. So the problem with methodological naturalism is that it keeps us from following the evidence to wherever it leads, especially when we're looking at questions about origins or questions about the nature of the human mind, questions that have both a scientific and philosophical dimension to them.
So today we're going to be talking about these topics: video games, science fiction, computer science, quantum physics, and mysticism. It's quite a bit to pack into an hour, and we need to leave some time for Q&A. Now, you'll notice that I included two topics that sometimes aren't discussed by a lot of academics or scientists, which is science fiction and mysticism. But it turns out they're actually quite relevant and important when we talk about the simulation hypothesis. First, most of the references we have are from science fiction, like The Matrix, and that's really the question that we're going to be trying to answer today is, do we live in the Matrix? But also, we start to get into this question of what is consciousness. And it's something that science hasn't fully understood yet, but mystics have been studying it for thousands of years. So, although sometimes scientists get upset at me, why are you talking about mysticism and religion in the same breath as quantum physics? I did that deliberately. Will we get to the point where the video game is indistinguishable from reality? I would argue we're actually getting there very quickly.
But anyway, going all the way back to the atheists, is the atheists see that Jews, just like other believers, have a lifestyle connected to it, so gee, maybe we're the same. And they see that we're very devoted. Gee, they seem the same. Except the atheists and the Jews believe in the same God. And the God that the atheists don't believe in is the God that the believers believe in, meaning the non-Jews. So in the end, the atheists and the Jews have everything in common. And I've proven it over and over and over again that before there was something, there was nothing is the God we're talking about. And I've had many atheists raise their hands and say, Rabbi, that's a God I could believe in, because I always thought God was nothing. So that's right, we're on the same page.
I sort of feel like I'm starting to get to the point where my whole perspective on Christian apologetics is so far from where it once was. This week I came across this guy, Stephen Meyer. So he's a biblical creationist guy, has like a PhD in philosophy of science, and been listening to a few of his presentations and arguments. He's a big proponent of intelligent design and refuting things like theistic evolution and, all those things which on the surface level, I'd still definitely be in agreement with and think are important points to establish to a degree, but, it's not even just that he's just like so many others still trying to argue from the basis of a Copernican expanding universe, with space and gravity and everything. But it's more than that. It's so much more than that now. And I've had a few people recently asking, like, why aren't you talking about cosmology as much or flat Earth? And part of me is going, well, I feel like I've been talking about it nonstop. Even if it's sort of indirectly, but this whole broader question of the relationship between faith and Christian apologetics and science, appealing to science as something to try and convince people of the veracity of the Bible. The more I just look back on the whole progression of all these ideas and arguments and debates and throughout church history, so much of it just seems kind of missing the point or just was fixating on some minute thing and missing the whole bigger picture. Not being able to see the forest for the trees. And it could be something as simple as arguing from Copernican cosmology and the expanding universe and convincing yourself that you're not actually trying to use evolution-based models to deny evolution. This whole self-contradiction that they can't bring themselves to recognize. But even something like just as basic as intelligent design, thinking that it's some kind of intellectual victory if you can convince people that there's design in the cosmos. And he's talking about DNA and and how everything's like software, and it's information at the base of everything, and yeah, so it kind of struck me, right, because I had come across this Rizwan, whatever his name is, this guy giving a Google talk talking about his book on the simulation theory, simulation hypothesis, and yeah, video games and mysticism and AI. It's fascinating. I mean, I could talk just about that whole presentation, but it's kind of nothing really new to unpack there. But it is all being combined, right, in kind of one increasingly cohesive narrative on that side, and that's the side that it's like the Christian apologetics, the Christian creationist world is still, in their minds, battling against Richard Dawkins and the new atheists and secular humanism and scientific materialism and all these things, which are definitely in the world, but if secular humanism was really the agenda that Satan was trying to establish in the world as the monolithic belief system, then he is horribly failed, because it has come back to mysticism. Just like, it blew me away listening to Rabbi Glaser, my favorite Kabbalistic rabbi professor. He's openly talking about how, like, yeah, the atheists believe in the same God we do. The same God that is nothing, even though he'll turn around and talk about God as a being, and God as a person, and God thinks this, and God thinks that, and he has all these personal traits and things, but at the same time, we can't know anything about him, and he's nothing. If you try and put him in a box, then you're making him too small, and that's not God. So God is nothing. I mean, it's just contrived horse crap, and it's obvious when you're looking at it from the outside in. But overall, it just shows me that, yeah, the whole idea of just trying to convince people that there's intelligent design in the universe, and it's not random. I mean, everybody knows it's not random. It's just it's a self-delusion, and that's the thing. The whole reason that simulation theory is gaining such acceptance more and more is because people instinctively know that there's design in the world, not just in the heavens and the motions of the planets and the stars and all these calculations that you make, but every morning when you open your eyes and you look around you interact with the world, and you think your thoughts and interact with other human beings and have relationships and do all the things you do. Everything has an order. Everything you expect when you see an object, that it's going to behave the way that, a stone is going to have the weight of a stone, wood is going to split in half when you chop it with an axe, and, all these basic things. It's not suddenly going to, explode when you try and chop a piece of wood. It's not random, it's ordered, it's designed, it's not some profound thing that we only prove once we're able to, supposedly calculate the orbital motions of stars and planets with telescopes. I mean, it's just stupid. It's playing this game, this intellectual, game where Christians, somehow we want to claim science, and we want to claim all these discoveries for ourselves, and use science to try and prove God and prove that the Bible is true. And where in the Bible does God ever ask us to do that? Where do you see the apostles or the patriarchs ever trying to appeal to human wisdom and scientific knowledge, observational knowledge about mechanical, physical processes and properties in order to prove that God revealed himself through a nation, through history, through prophets and kings and ordinary people? He didn't use philosophers and scientists and great minds. Romans 1, they're always trying to apply Romans 1 to, modern astronomy. The heavens declare the glory of God. Well, they were declaring the glory of God before freaking Galileo ever pointed a telescope at Jupiter and concluded that it had moons orbiting around it. I mean, that's just... Everybody knows there's intelligent design. It's not something you gotta really prove. Because, here's the thing. When people don't want to surrender to the idea of a God who's not nothing, but actually a being, a person, a consciousness, not some impersonal, diffused, pantheistic consciousness, but like a real person, just like we use in every other sense of the word when we're talking about a personal being, an intelligent personal being. But if people don't want that kind of God, they can just as easily turn around and say that, oh, the whole world's a computer simulation running on a computer in the basement of an alien child or something. Because indeed, I mean, even Neil deGrasse Tyson is down with that kind of God. That kind of intelligent designer. He hates the term intelligent design when it's associated with biblical creation, but not if it's an alien computer simulation. What does that tell you? It just shows you that this whole idea that scientism is a religion is not hyperbole. It really is a religion. They believe in metaphysics. They believe in consciousness. They believe in the idea of higher intelligent beings. I just call them aliens or whatever. Like literally every concept that you could pull out of the Bible, there's a science fiction alternative for. The world is just playing games with God, and instead of pointing to the gospel, pointing to the things that Jesus spoke about in his parables. Jesus spoke in parables. He wasn't. How much cosmological insight and information and scientific revelation do you think Jesus could have expounded upon during his time on Earth with crowds of people? I mean, he could have wowed them with so much scientific knowledge. It would be science, right? Because if he's God, he doesn't have to discover it. But so the ironic thing is that in this one talk, Stephen Meyer, he's talking about the self-contradiction and the hypocrisy of the theistic evolutionists, asking the question, where does your theism impact your evolution? Because you believe in all the same progression from the Big Bang all the way through Darwin and biological evolution, billions of years. And you ask them the question is, does God direct the evolution? And they say, well, maybe, but maybe not. And so it's just God tacked on. And so he rightly poses the question, like, where does your theology actually connect with this evolution? Because they don't, obviously. So you just want to have your belief in God just tacked on to the end, even though it makes no sense. So he's rightly pointing out this disconnect, this disingenuous, spirituality. But the irony for me is that I think that's really essentially what even young Earth creationism, even our biblical creationism and biblical apologetics that still adhere to a literal six-day creation and the Earth being very young. You want to defend the idea that the Bible is history, that Noah's Ark and the flood and all that really happened, and the parting of the Red Sea and Jesus rising from the dead, that was all true. And so you're trying to use modern science and astronomy and physics and whatever else to argue that the Bible is true with all these miraculous things, and people see the disconnect, right? In that it's, somewhere in the past 2,000 years since all this supernatural intervention with the natural world was going on and being recorded in these biblical books, we've progressed past that. So now we could just point to how much we know about all the design of these galaxies and black holes and all this other junk that it's all made up. But there's no supernatural element to any of it today. They've pragmatically become just like the materialists, making these philosophical arguments, but really there's no concept of there's a spiritual dimension to reality when you read the Bible. And if the Bible is true, there's a spiritual reality, a spiritual dimension to reality now. And not just in the sense that there is a God who you can't see with your eyes, but he's everywhere. And not just in the sense that, yes, you are a consciousness, which means you're more than just neurons firing a bunch of mechanical processes, but you are a soul. There's a spiritual dimension to who you are, separate from your body, but interfaced with your physical body somehow through the brain or wherever, however that works. There's an interface, there's an overlap. Who you are and your thoughts and your feelings and your innermost being are not a matter of biology. And deep down people know this. It's a false front, it's a false flag, this materialistic science. Because even they don't hold to it. I mean, look at dark matter and dark energy. So they can give themselves an out anytime they want. They can toss aside their materialism when it's convenient for them, but so why are we still trying to play according to these intellectual rules of academia that they don't even hold to? There's no intellectual integrity to any of this. And I'm not really trying to say anything just to pick on individuals or figures, creationist camps or anything. I'm just kind of speaking more in my general attitude, I guess, towards just the church. The shrinking number of people who still hold to a somewhat sound biblical doctrine of salvation and the gospel. It's like a simulation theory. Like, what a bunch of nonsense. Right? How many years are going to go by before these guys start taking this stuff seriously? I don't know if ever, and obviously I don't take it seriously in the way it's presented, but because it really is the same thing that the occult and the Kabbalah have been teaching for a long, long time. And now just, amazingly, it's just popping up in this whole new context, in this whole new paradigm of Silicon Valley and AI and, virtual reality and science fiction and the Matrix. People today understand Kabbalah far better than they even know and than they ever have in history, because it was super secretive for a long time. And now it is not. And now it is stuff like this mysticism that we call science, that is the prevailing worldview.
But thanks to our 21st century advancements in computing and technology, we've been able to add an even more interesting question to the bunch. Do we live in a simulation? At first glance, this might seem like a silly thought, but there's actually plenty of reason to assume that we may well be Sims in some advanced civilization science experiment. If you look at how our technology has progressed over the last 50 years or so, it's pretty shocking to see just how far we've come. 47 years ago, the world got its first taste of widely available video games with Pong. Cutting edge at the time, Pong consisted of 2 rectangles and a dot, which players could bounce from side to side. Fast forward to today, and we're getting close to photorealistic video games and seeing the rapid maturation of virtual and augmented reality devices. This explosion of technology has led some thinkers to believe that, at some point in the future, our descendants will have developed the capacity to run incredibly complex ancestor simulations, and that we may be living in one such program. If it is possible to run such a massively intricate simulation, then the odds of us being real biological entities are greatly diminished. Think of it like this. If these supercomputers do come to exist, then it would make sense to assume that there would be many such simulations running at various points in the future. As technology advances, say 1,000 years from now, it's increasingly likely that more powerful supercomputers could run hundreds or thousands or even millions of ancestor simulations simultaneously. If we accept this line of reasoning, then it would be foolish to assume that out of all the millions of simulated realities, we happen to live in the original biological one that hasn't yet developed the simulation technology. This is pretty strange to think about, but how exactly could we determine whether or not our reality is real?
Now, how does God do it? How does God project us? The answer is He projects us via parallel realms. This whole system is being created by parallel realms, just like this board is. There's light shining on the board, but if I put my hand and I create now a filter of that light, now I've created this, an image. There's now an image created via the filter of my hand. Well, what if I made that filter more complex? Well, after a while, maybe it'd be, I don't know what it'd be. It'd be I can't make anything creative out there with this angle, but if it were another angle, maybe I could make a dog or a chicken or something. But you understand that the more complex the filtering system, the more complex the image. Our entire world is a direct result of infinite light shining through parallel universes. Our entire existence is because of infinite light shining through parallel universes. Infinite light shining through the universe. That's how we're here.
I've made some discoveries in my own personal life with the science that, Pythagoras was searching for. I was able to open up the flower of life properly and find the real wave conjugations that we've been looking for 10,000 years. Why would I continue, walking on water for tips when I've got an entire generation to teach a whole new world?
That's a big remark.
Yeah.
What do you intend to do?
Well, let me put it this way. All energy in the universe is expressed in motion. All motion is expressed in waves. All waves are curved. So where does the straight lines come from to make the platonic solids? There are no straight lines. So when I took the flower of life and opened it properly, I found a whole new wave conjugations that expose the in-between spaces. It's the thing that holds us all together.
Science has taught us that stars are distant suns and planets are distant worlds. Let's zoom into the planet Mars and see what it really looks like. Is it really a distant ball reflecting sunlight? Is this really a distant ball reflecting sunlight? They told us this was nearly 1 billion miles away, and the ring was rocks and dust. Is this really reflecting sunlight? Stars, we were told, are distant suns. Is this what they look like to you? You'll notice that each of the stars have their own individual shapes, colors, and personalities. They lied to us, guys.